but it works well as a base for other things. So I'm just gonna do a flat wash, so I'm working my way back and forth across my rectangle, trying to keep the color as even as possible. So I didn't do a super great job at flat wash, but maybe I'll even out as it dries. And like I said, that should be a review, right, from the next one I'm going to do is a graduated wash. It doesn't matter if I go top to bottom or side to side, but this graduated means that it starts dark, and then I'm gradually going to pick up water. Water as I go to lighten the color. And I'll probably just need to squeeze my paintbrush dry a little bit and get some of this extra pool off, so I can take my paintbrush and get rid of some of the pool. I can also lighten up the lighter side if I feel like I didn't get it as light as I wanted it to be. And like I said, most of these should be reviewed, so go through them fairly quickly. I remember a graduated wash, you usually do that for the sky, right? Because the sky tends to be lighter at the bottom. And then all of these washes are always best if you don't fuss with them. So I'm fussing, of course, with mine now, and it's going to turn out really weird. Let's think. Other textures from painting one. A wet into wet color mix, right? So if I take one color to start with, so I'm going to take this kind of golden-y yellow, go across the top, and I don't have a lot of water in that golden-y yellow. I'm going to clean my paintbrush off, and now I'm going to do this with complementary colors because I'm thinking about color schemes while I'm doing this, right? So what happens if I do a wet wash with yellow and purple? So all I'm going to do is purple here at this opposite side, and I'm going to let them sort of do their thing where they hit the water, where the paint hits the paint. If I want more movement out of my paint, more water. So I just went and got clean water and just stuck here at the bridge between the two because I didn't have very much water in my paint. I can also encourage them to do other things, right, by tipping my paper. So you can see that it starts to change. And water, the paint will move more. Less water, the paint won't move quite as much. So I have kind of a lot of water here, so you can see this pool here down at the bottom edge. So all I did is I washed my paintbrush out and I squeezed the water out of it with my paper towel. And now I can come back along this bottom edge, like water that's here. And that will stop some of the move paint. And it will also keep it from jumping my little tape fence if I'm worried that I used way too much water. So you can see, even though I went diagonal across there, that's no longer diagonal. It's mixing and churning and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I'm going to do a wet wash. I'm going to use a different color this time, just to see what happens when I try a little bit different color. So I've got a lot of like wet green this time, and let's see, I'm going to come back with yellow. So more of an analogous color scheme because the other one was complementary. Oh, my green totally took over the yellow. That's what happened. Oh, and I'm going to splash. See if I can get a couple of splats of yellow to sit on top. Oops, over splattered. So you can kind of see that that was a wet into wet color mix, and then I splattered on top of it so that the splatters are going to continue to mix well into the color. And then I just did another flat wash. We're gonna go back to those flat washes for the alcohol and the salt. So I'm gonna show you what happens when you do a glazed texture effect, so that I have one color underneath and I'm gonna put a completely different color over the top, and then use the alcohol and the salt over the, opens up holes in the top color to the bottom color, okay? So I did a flat, a graduated, a wet into wet, a wet into wet, another flat. If you guys will start dry. My first flat wash is ready to go, but so we talked some in paint the idea of like glazing, right? And what happens if you overlap paint. So I'm gonna peek up a piece of my tape here. Oh, maybe a lighter color. So I'm gonna paint a wash down here in this corner of this purple. Doesn't matter what color you use. And I'm gonna peel the tape back. Because we can do like a dry brush technique, so I squeezed most of the paint, most of the water out of my paintbrush, right? Which means that I can make like fine lines over here where it's dry. But if I try to make those same fine lines here in my paint where it's wet. So I peeled the tape back just to give me the contrast between lines on dry paper and lines on wet paper. Because sometimes that can be sort of an intriguing effect. I have very little paint in my paintbrush and I make a line, right? So like I could write a name or something or make a design, the wet, if it's wet first or dry first. So that I made a little yellow, and it's hard to see the yellow on that darker color I'm seeing. So this idea that watercolor layers over itself, right, is called glazing. So I'm gonna just keep doing brush like design over here in this last square. And once those lines are dry, I'm gonna paint a new wash over the top of them just to see what happens. So I have like almost in my paintbrush, just enough to make the paint go. And I'm gonna make some crazy just designs to paint over in a little bit when they dry. Compared to when I did the same designs over here on this square that's wet and the effect there. So this side is the designs over wet, and that will be wet over the dry designs later in a little while. And that effect, when we put wet paint over dry paint, is called glazing. And it's what you can do to like change a color. Like if you, you know, decide a color is not the right color or the right tone, you can always go. So my very first flat wash that I did up here is dry. Before you try this, make sure your wash is dry. And you should have a bin of texture tools at your table. If you need refills of some of these things, you'll have to let me know. I think I just went to the store and bought more salt. So I'm going back to this first wash. And that first wash is kind of that orangey, burnt orangey brown. And I'm gonna put a contrasting color over the top of it, okay? So I'm gonna put a color that's like brighter and lighter. I'm actually gonna pick a complementary, so I'm gonna do turquoisey blue over the top. So I'm going to do a nice wet wash of this blue over the top. Oh, apparently stick my paintbrush in the salt because I'm not paying attention. Oops. And then while it's still wet, while fresh, I'm going to sprinkle a little salt on here just to see what happens when over another color, and then use the salt. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but with alcohol. And that'll probably be the one thing that you do need refill on is alcohol. Because using that, if I have a container with liquid in it, that I need to leave it standing straight up and down. So I'll come around with the alcohol bottle. And I'm gonna do this on two, so I still have one more blank one here, and I have this one from up here I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do, and then I'm gonna come around so you guys have some alcohol. Let's see. I'm gonna put another color over the top of this color, just like I did before on the last one. So I'm gonna put some purple over the top. And then while it's wet, I'm gonna dip my straw in alcohol, and I'm gonna open up holes using the alcohol. I can draw alcohol on here too and see if that makes a little different effect. Or see if I can get the little circles, the little dots. And that was my graduated wash from earlier. I'm gonna do the same thing down here. Just a clean space. And I'm gonna try the alcohol here again. Right, so I'm gonna like try to sprinkle the alcohol. I'm gonna drips, try to rack the straw to get some of those dots. So with that dark color, that's super dramatic. Any of you guys not have alcohol at your table? Are you empty? Are you out? Alcohol, anybody? There should be straws and some caps at the bottom of your container to play with the alcohol with. So it's always like the salt and the rubbing alcohol work best in a wash, a soupy wash. If your wash is too dry, the effects will not be the same. And then salt, if you overdo the salt or if you overdo the alcohol, obviously you don't get any contrast, right? Put too much on there, it just opens up all of the pigment. If it didn't work like that on my paper, the salt, I won't know what that looks like until it dries. And I think I wish I'd used a darker color, but I can do another one on the other side. The alcohol, you can see kind of the effect right away, and I can see that that golden brown is like showing through the alcohol versus this one that had the white paper underneath it. Definitely looks different. If I didn't get any change when I put the alcohol on there, it's a sign that I didn't have enough water in my wash or not enough pigment. This works more dramatically if the color is darker or I have a lot of contrast between the undercolor and the upper color. So if you need to try them again, you should still have more squares. This one?
Yeah.
It's just that alcohol with no, I did alcohol again with no color, because this was the one with color underneath, and then this is just the alcohol and the paint. So this is 2 layers of paint. I wanted to see the difference. What does it look like with 2 layers of paint and 1 layer of paint? Let's see. Or if it's gonna change anything. I have salt water out here now. We're from painting 1, when we would use the color crayon, right? The white color crayon. There's no such thing as white watercolor. So if I'm making a painting and I need white, I need to preserve the white of my paper, right? The nice watercolor people make something called watercolor mask or masking fluid. Unfortunately, it's made out of 100% latex, and so it's not safe to use in a classroom. If you have a latex allergy, or have a family member with a latex allergy, it would be really a disaster. So it's why we get to use white wax instead. And it is a way, like I said, for me to keep white paper. I'm just going to draw here a little bit on my paper using the white color crayon. Have to kind of like tip the sheet to sort of see what you're up to, right? And you do have to kind of press hard to have it turn out. And then this is a good technique to remember, like I said, if you are needing to keep white paper. So I'm gonna do some wet into wet mixing just over the top of that design that I drew with my white color crayon. And let's see what I can get. So I'm just kind of playing around on my white. I just drew some like white stripes on there. But like in my head, I'm already like thinking, oh, it's almost like little birch trees. I could make little trees out of there. So that's kind of what the white color crayon is about. You can preserve your white paper. So if you're making a design, like you want to make white daisies on, you know, a field, if I go through and I color my white daisies white with a crayon, they're going to stay white even if I paint right over the top of them, which is sort of, right? You do have to push pretty hard, and like I said, you do have to kind of pay attention, like right, I went a little. But very quickly I have a little, like I said, it's like a little birch forest here. Okay, let's see. I am going to try another one with the salt and wet into wet color mixing, but this time I'm going to kind of experiment, and I'm going to put just some clean water down the middle of my paper first. So clean water first down the middle, and then I'm going to paint. I'm going to try to have really dark color this bottom edge, and I'm gonna just, oh, I hit the water. I found my water. You can see all I did was hit the tiny corner of the water, and it's really fast actually. So I don't know if my experiment's gonna be very successful now because that was much quicker in the water than I was expecting. Now I'm gonna have a different color up here. Yeah, my darker color is just gonna take over. Paint move that way, right? Because all I did was hit that and boom, that blue paint took over everything, everything, everything. I'm gonna come back with some green and I'm gonna try to open some blooms in the green.